Hello, winners, and welcome to Two for the Win with your hosts, Nick and Wil. What does leading and eating have to do with today's episode? Well, you will find out shortly, but before we jump into that, please be sure to subscribe, share, and follow Two for the Win on your favorite platform. I want to give a shout out to Nick Menard and nickmenard.com and his Amazon best-selling book, The 1% Push Legacy, for sponsoring today's episode. Happy Monday, Nick.
Happy Monday, Wil. Hello, winners.
Hello. So, we're going to have a little smorgasbord of leadership today, and we are going to review one of our favorite authors, Simon Sinek, and his book, Leaders Eat Last. So that's the pun with the foodie analogy, but a lot of truisms in this book. But do you want to give a high-level overview of what resonated with you before we jump into our quotes and quips?
No, I think the title, says it all. So, like as a leader, as a manager, you need to be front of everybody and pulling everybody by telling them what to do. And as a leader, you are behind, you are last, you are just showing by example. And then you just push people up, and you're the last one to be recognized. That's what should be a leader. So we're going to talk about it. I'm very excited.
Yeah, me too. And, it's funny, we were talking about this offline. We talk about Simon Sinek, Start With Why. Both of us have his book like behind us, but yet we haven't reviewed that book. So we'll have to do that one in a future episode. But now, we're going to talk about Leaders Eat Last, which came after he wrote Start With Why. So it has, I would say, refined points
Mhm.
that he talks about with Start With Why. So, which is great, right? I mean, that's always the key. All right, so let's jump into our favorite segment,
Quotes
quote
and quips.
with. We go through these phases where we crush it sometimes and sometimes we don't. All right, so one is so we'll do a quote from the book with the author. This one I don't know, it just really kind of stuck out to me. So hopefully it resonates with our leaders, but it's from Simon Sinek in this book, and it says, "Our strength will come not from the sharpness of our spears, but from our willingness to offer others the protection of our shields."
Mm,
Thoughts on that one?
I love the quote. So basically, what I always said. So a leader should be help you, shield you from the noise, that's coming around you. Because as you know, like when you are definitely in corporate America, you will be bombarded with a lot of information coming from all direction, from different departments, from different line of leadership. And so shielding or people to make sure that they can focus on what they should be focusing on is very, very important. And so the shielding aspect, that's how I think about when I hear that. So the most important is to help people with their challenges. So when you are focusing on one thing and making sure that you shield them with all the noise, but then you help them navigate the difficult situation that they have to navigate by giving them the little nuggets that will make a huge difference at the end of the day. It's for me the number one, the number one goal of a leader when you have a team, that you work with each and every day. So that's what I take from the quote that you just shared.
Yeah, no, well said. And I think one of the things that came to mind was remember there was this like old pic or GIF or whatever, but it had the difference between a leader and a manager, and one it's there's people who are like pulling something, and you got this leader
Mm.
like shouting at them, and then you got the other one where the leader is with them and kind of guiding them. Yeah, and that's kind of what was going through my mind because I was thinking like. Um, when tension rises, it can be sometimes for people they default into tell mode, right? And when you think about the different styles of leadership, like from Daniel Goleman's work, that would be the coercive or directive style. And there are certain situations where that's needed. It's probably needed about 5% of the time in aggregate, where you just kind of have to take charge and kind of point the way, especially in times of crisis. But more often than not, it's not the right. style to utilize. And to your point, it's much you can get short-term results. So I've seen leaders do this where they put so much volume of work on people, um, that they burn them out within 2 years. But they get the results, and then they go through another set of people, it seems like a cycle every couple of years. And because they get the results, when you have out of touch senior leadership, they actually get rewarded. But when you think about the delta between those results and results done where people are leading in a way, to your point, using the shield, right? How do you siphon the noise and the signal so people can stay focused? How do you protect them from initiative sprawl and different things like that so they can focus on the critical few? And I would argue that even in cases where those situations don't produce even better results than the one who's using the coercive or directive style, the lack of regretted attrition and what that means for the client experience as well as the business economics, I think more than bridges the gap. Because usually, maybe in short bursts, the directive style is getting a little bit better results, but it's not sustainable. And it's certainly not sustainable with uh, many of the core, like, high performers because they will be like, I'm out
Mhm.
after a while, and I've seen it. I've seen it where people who are way more talented and capable of producing great results leave because of the,
Mm.
uh, using of the spear, so to speak, by the leader, whereas less talented folks, but people who are put in a position where they can learn and develop and grow, have more lasting impact.
I couldn't agree more. So very well said. And you know, we all know in different industry we worked in things like that happening nonstop. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to go with a clip also from Simon Sinek. Just because we like Simon Sinek, we're going to give him the double dip the chip, so to speak, with the quote and the quip. So the quip is my favorite definition of love is giving someone the power to destroy us and trusting they won't use it.
Oof. Well, I can talk about this. Yeah, no. So that's very well said. Well, as a leader, you need to empower the people that you work with. But by doing so, sometimes you need to be a little bit more transparent than the guideline would advise you to. And by doing so, you put yourself in a situation where you may, you may put yourself in trouble. Like if you have some non-leader above you, but people who are managed by the book. And so this is literally something that it's true. I always make sure to tell all the people I work with, like, I will give you all the tools to be successful. I will fight for you along the way behind closed door. I will have your back all the time. Um, Here's what the end result should be. Here's what the steps that I believe we should be taking. Then we discuss to make sure that we are all in agreement, because it's not me telling them, but it's us figure it out together what is the best way to do. So we all share what we think would be the best. And then we put that in practice, but by using the transparency, like I said, to block the noise from all the rest. Because if we have to follow everything that comes our way in business, in corporate America, anything like that, you will be overwhelmed. So you need to take that on your back as a leader and make sure that your team are just focusing on what needs to be focused. But by doing so, you may not share some things that for some people is very important to share, but for you, you know what your team needs. And that can be a tricky decision to make on a leadership level. So what do you want your team to actually be aware of in order to be successful? Is this piece of information is going to be more of a challenge along the way, something that's going to be constantly in their mind that may hinder their progress? Or is this piece of information are actually going to be helping them achieving whatever goal we have? And that's your role in leadership in order to figure it out what should be redirected to your team. But by doing so, you may not be 100% in guideline with what you expect to share all information coming your way. So that puts you in a situation that if someone in your team have any kind of issue with you for whatever reason, they may use that against you by saying like, I was not being aware of this information, or he didn't share that way or at the right timing or things like that. So, but you need to trust. I will always lean toward trust until someone give me the reason to not trust them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I think, when I was thinking about, that quip and then also what you're saying, it's like, the willingness to be vulnerable. And, for a lot of reasons, for a lot of people, I think they have shields up, right? Or walls up, however you wanna describe it. And they're not as willing to be vulnerable because they've probably been hurt in the past by somebody, right? And not to be a couch psychologist, but it there's probably a number of reasons why they feel, like exposing the soft underbelly puts them at risk, right? And it could be manufactured in their own mind, or it could be from life experience that they had, previously. And I think, that's why, like, I've shared with, some people, like, to your point, more often than not, I won't say I do this all the time, but more often than not, I will start with a level of trust until they give me a reason not to. Some people, candidly, after about 30 seconds to 2 minutes of interacting, I'm the walls are up. They're using words or giving off a certain vibe in the way they're talking and conducting themselves, where I'm like, this person maybe is, just somebody to keep an eye on a little bit." But for the most part, I try to be trusting. But even in that scenario, I would say most people probably have, what I would call the quote unquote inner circle, right?
Mm,
Where there's a handful of people, maybe where you're like, if the stuff ever hits the fan, I know I can count on these people. To your point earlier, they have my back, I got their back. And I think that's where having that vulnerability, is important, because that, like he's talking about here with love and trust, when you are that transparent with somebody, again, none of us are perfect, right? They're going to see the great things about you. They'll also see the things that maybe are, uh, based on society or whatever,
mm,
maybe aren't the most ideal, but you trust them, right? You're willing to be more transparent. But when they're in that inner circle, usually it's, reciprocated, right? And if not, that's probably one of the more largest violations of trust, because,
mhm.
uh, there was an understanding and then somebody didn't fulfill their part
Yeah.
in that so,
I think the key
yeah.
word you said is vulnerability, and that's very well said. I think it's really the key word. And if you wanna, because everything we talk about on Monday Mindset can be, a parallel with personal life. And you see, it's very hard when you've been through relationships and then you've been, hurt because someone broke the trust. It's very hard to just trust the next person. But if you don't, you're just going straight to a wall because it's never going to work because you need to learn to retrust the person, the next person. And so you cannot use what happened in the past in your future. But yeah, I understand that it's very hard to do because, you learn from experience and then you feel like everybody are the same. And that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, well said. All right. So back to Simon Sinek,
Mm,
leaders eating last. There's like three main areas we're going to cover in reviewing of his book, which again, highly recommend all of Simon Sinek's work. But the first one is, and it's kind of tied into what we've been talking about with our quote and our quip, the circle of safety. And great leaders create environments where people feel safe. We've talked about this in the past and other episodes, with psychological safety. Um, but I guess, let's take a little bit of different track here, because one of the things that I think people don't always correlate with creating psychological safe environments is with innovation. So, in your opinion, Nick, just as what you've seen, why does fear destroy innovation within a team?
Well, if people that work with you don't have your trust, don't have the trust that you want them to have, they're always going to build walls. And if you build walls, it's going to be very hard for you to get inside because the trust is not there. And innovation comes with people who their head is flowing with ideas, and then you want to implement things. But if they don't trust you as a leader, they will not be able to actually interact the right way in order to be able to scale the innovation, because they want to keep it for themselves, because they're not trusting the environment around them. And so innovation works the best when you have a strong culture, when you have a strong group of people who are all leaning toward the same goal. And then you will be able to implement through that culture a lot of innovation and see what stick, the innovation that you will want to be able to scale in the future. But if you don't have that trust factor, the safety around you, that's going to be very hard for people to open up and actually share ideas. They want to keep them more for themselves. And the worst thing you can have in a team is people going solo. And it's the same in team sports. When you have someone who think about, I will take the analogy of basketball again. When you have 5 against 5 basketball, and when you have a player who think about his stats because he wants to be traded or he wants to get paid at the end of the year, but don't think about the success of the team, yes, he may have 25, 30 points a game or 15 rebounds again, depending the position, but the team is losing every game. While if he's thinking about the success of the team, he will he will maybe sacrifice some of his personal statistics for the well-being of the team. And so that's the same in business setting. If you have someone who goes solo, who wants to just try things himself and keep it for himself or herself, then you will be lacking the power of the team to innovate all together and to be able to showcase results at the end of the day as a team.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly, and I was thinking of I have a business partner who's in a different line of business, and, one of the things, we were talking about pretty recently was, she has a new, boss that, due to the, reorg, she's reporting to somebody differently,
Mhm.
and, she's like, I'm afraid to make any mistake because if I make the littlest mistake, I get after hours emails, I
Mm.
get things, I get all this stuff, and it's small stuff, right? And then when you look at this falls into a trap for some leaders. I would really refer to them as more managers, where they they say all the right things, right? Like, "Yeah, we want you to try different things, learn and stuff." But people are observant and, your actions speak louder than your words, right? And if you really are fostering an environment where, um, you're trying to create a psychologically safe environment for people to test things, as a leader, you have to be comfortable that mistakes will be made and not dwell so much on the mistakes but focus more on what are the learnings. Now, I know some people are probably thinking, "Oh yeah, when I'm when I notice something, like maybe something is simple but important, like a grammatical error or a misspelling in a client-facing email." Yeah, it's important to call it out, right? Because you wanna make sure people are, are they reviewing it in time? Are they trying to do too much too quickly and therefore the quality is slipping? So stuff like that. But if you're like browbeating somebody over that consistently, like you're creating an environment where you're not going to get the best out of that person. And innovation, I like how you went with it because I think sometimes people think of innovation as creating something new and that is a part of it, but a lot of times innovation is more how to do nuanced things or do things differently in a nuanced way, right? So it's not necessarily creating a new system or a new product or a new service. It's, hey, here's how we're doing something. Here's an idea I have of how we could do it maybe a little more efficient and effective. And that's what you want to cultivate within your organization because that's what's going to lead, generally speaking, to better outcomes, right? But if you don't create those environments, if people always feel like they have to look over their shoulder, you're not going to get the best out of the people. And again, you only have them until something comes along that's just the same or slightly better, and then they're gone. And so, you know, um, again, I know some people don't really, that doesn't really mean much to them. Um, and I think candidly, they miss out on a lot and they could be even better if they had a little bit more thoughtfulness and empathy about that.
No, very very well said. I couldn't agree more. You said it all.
All right. So the second part is what Simon will refer to as the biology of leadership. So put on your lab coat, put on your lab glasses and pocket protector, and we're going to do a little biology experiment
Uh-oh.
when it comes to leadership. Yeah, but Simon, what he talks about is trust and cooperation are biological, which is kind of interesting. So when you think about, and we've slightly touched on this, and actually I had a video on this I used in a kickoff recently about dopamine, right? And dopamine is that chemical in the brain that kind of gives you that motivated rush, like that achievement. It's that spark. And you can get it when you're exercising or competing or in business. There's a lot of ways you can get dopamine. Sports betting, all that stuff that can all provide dopamine on that. And then you have oxytocin, which is the chemical that's around trust, right? And building that up. And then of course cortisol, when it comes to stress and how does someone manage stress and how does that flow through. So there's actually chemical makeup in our brain wiring that can guide us in acting in a certain way and then how others perceive and respond in those interactions. And there's certainly things you can do to positively address it. One is certainly sleep, is a big one. Like, you ever notice people who you can tell aren't getting much sleep versus what they need, tends to affect their behavior. Diet can play a big role. If you're not getting the right nutrients and things like that, some of those things can affect it. Exercise certainly is one as well. There's a number of different things that can impact that. We've talked in the past the environment, like who you're hanging around with, and that can have an impact as well. But let me stop talking and instead ask you a question about that. So, um, in your opinion, how does short-term pressure kill long-term loyalty if people are applying pressure poorly?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So that's something that everybody can relate to at some point in business or in your work or things like that. When you have a leader who is constantly coming up with new ideas and new focus area, and they're like, "Oh my God, we need to do this or this right now because that's the new bright shiny thing that we need to be performed towards," and then everybody jump on this and then we make it something happen and then we proud of ourselves because we get somewhere, and then when we almost finished, the leader comes back and said, no, wait, we need to focus on this now, and come up with new focus area constantly. All right, and it's all short term, so there is no vision there. And if you don't have a vision as a business owner, as an employee or whatever like that, ho- how can you actually have success or wins along the way? Because you feel like you never achieve anything completely because you jump from one thing to the other. And that's actually trying to achieve short term success. Again, those are managers. They want to showcase their own manager, probably. Hey, look the progress we did the last 2 weeks because we make the focus on this. And then we make the focus on something else 2 weeks later. And look, we went up 1 or 2%, or we sold X amount of product more. All right, great. But you don't create an environment where people are getting master at anything because they're just jumping from one to the other nonstop, and they're unable to actually sustain something and actually be able to tell, hey, here's what we program ourselves or what we strategize beginning of the year to achieve by the end of the year. So we leave a long leeway to get there, and said, look, everything that we accomplished during the year to reach those goals. You just forgot that completely because you are only focusing in the next 2, 3 weeks. But this is not sustainable. You mentioned that earlier. That's how you create burnout. Like, people feel like they don't have, every time they turn on their computer on Monday, they wonder what's coming their plate. If you have a great strategy from beginning to the end, like let's take a year timeline, You know what needs to happen on Monday when you turn on your computer. And you can be feeling a lot more positive about the fact that you are able to do those things. And again, if something comes in between, that's where the leadership comes into play and said, okay, how can I alleviate those challenges for you or help you alleviate those challenges for you? But you cannot come up with 75 different um, new focus area all the time for short-term success. Because guess what? When you jump from one to the other, people forget about the last one. And so the number dropped again. And so if you want sustain success or sustain growth, you need to have a structure and a plan of action that will be like something that everybody understand from the start and want to to go towards that goal from the start. I'm not saying something cannot come in during the year because it's natural that you have some ideas coming up during the year, but it should never go against your structure from the beginning of the year. And that's what I want to say about this.
Yeah, I agree. We talked about it many times, focus on the critical few and then be steadfast, right? Like stick with the plan unless there's really clear signals that the plan needs adjustment. But no, well said. So the third area about leaders eat last from Simon Sinek is what he talks about sacrifice and responsibility. So what Simon is talking about is leadership is costly and that's the point. So when you think about, when you're trying to balance driving high performance in a small entrepreneurship endeavor in a small to medium sized business or large corporate environment, doing it in a way where you're keeping your people in front and not necessarily worrying about the leader shining from the front. It's more helping the leader coming and pushing the people forward and as a 1% push, so to speak, in a way where they get the limelight, right? And that's what he's talking about where leaders eat last. But in your mind, Nick, and based on the book and what you've observed in your career in sports and in the professional world, what does it really mean to quote unquote eat last?
What I want to talk about here is more about the maybe talk about success of a year as a leader, because
Okay.
what means success for a leader? Well, every time that I need to answer that question, I always say the same thing. My success depends of how many people in the team are actually achieving or overachieving success, which lead to promotion, for example, in this case, or leads to an increase of salary. That's how I define success. Not to get 2% more in metrics or to get X amount of dollar more sold during the year. That is all great. But for me as a leader, is my team progressing? Are my team getting better together? Is the culture optimal in the region, for example? Are people willing to come to our region or to our department because of the culture that we established? All those things means the most. And I will never come to my leader and said, "Hey, I did all of this year. We achieved all of this together. I should get a reward." No, I'm like, here are the people that worked with me and who drove the initiative. Those people needs to get fed. Those people needs to get promoted. And guess what's going to happen? If you have X amount of people getting promotion under you, the next natural step is that you will get a promotion. But never look at your own plate. Always look at other people's plate to come into the title of the book, Leader Eats Last.
Yeah, really well said, and we'll give a little bonus quote, and I know I've shared this one before, but it's from Sir Richard Branson, and he always talks about, I don't worry about taking care of my clients, I worry about taking care of my people, and they'll take care of their clients. And I think that's around the theme with Simon Sinek. He's talking about what you just shared as a leader. If you take care of your people, they will take care of the business. They will take care of the clients, and those sort of things. And you, by proxy, will also benefit. But it's about taking care of them first, not worrying about taking care of yourself first, which for some is very tough to do. We touched on a lot of things where, it's about being selfless. And for some people, for a variety of reasons, whether it's trust or vulnerability or um, uncertainty about their perception of how they're perceived, they don't operate in that way, and it causes more headaches than the benefits that that sort of energy drives. So there you have it, winners. Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last. Highly recommend it. Please check it out, as well as his other works. And again, thanks to Nick Menard and nickmenard.com and his Amazon bestselling book, The 1% Push Legacy, for sponsoring today's episode. Please be sure to follow us so you are aware of when the next episode drops, which will be next week. So until then, winners, take care.
Bye, winners. Bye-bye.